Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I grew up as a skinny kid who could eat whatever he wanted and never gain a pound. Throughout school, people made comments, but I learned to brush them off. By the time I hit my 30s, I had heard every joke in the book about my build. I stand at 185 centimeters tall and weigh 70 kilograms, which puts me on the lean side. My doctor confirmed I am perfectly healthy and suggested my metabolism just runs faster than most people. I accepted this about myself years ago and moved on with my life. My office is an interesting place. Every single person working here is male, which creates a specific dynamic. Most of us get along well enough, keeping things professional during work hours and occasionally grabbing drinks after. The atmosphere is usually relaxed, though our boss has a tendency to push boundaries with his sense of humor. Our boss, who sits at the top of the company hierarchy, has this habit of giving people nicknames. Some are harmless, others less so. About 6 months ago, he started calling me Sparrow in our native language. The term carries a very specific meaning where I come from. It suggests someone small, fragile, and weak. The first time he used it, a few colleagues chuckled nervously. I smiled politely and continued with my work. The nickname stuck. He would use it casually during meetings, when passing my desk, or when addressing me in group emails. Each time I noticed some of my co-workers shifting uncomfortably in their seats. One colleague pulled me aside after an awkward meeting and asked if the comments bothered me. I told him I had thick skin and could handle it. But his question made me think about something important. Not everyone can brush off comments about their appearance. Some people carry insecurities that run deep, and workplace jokes can cut harder than intended. I started wondering what would happen if our boss directed similar comments toward someone who struggled with their weight or had body image issues. The damage could be significant. Someone needed to make him realize his jokes were crossing a line, and apparently that someone had to be me. I decided to wait for the right moment. I did not want to make a scene or create drama. I just needed to find a way to make him uncomfortable enough to reconsider his behavior. The opportunity presented itself yesterday afternoon. He walked over to my desk around 3 in the afternoon, asking about a project deadline. We discussed the timeline for a few minutes, and then somehow the conversation shifted to lunch. I mentioned I had skipped the meal because I was too focused on work. My boss asked if I was going to eat anything today, calling me Sparrow in that same mocking tone. The way he phrased it suggested I barely ate at all. His tone carried that same playful mockery I had grown used to hearing. This was my chance. I told him I was not planning to eat because I was on a diet and trying to lose weight. His expression changed instantly. The smug smile disappeared from his face. He asked what I meant, his voice rising in surprise. I explained that I had been feeling bloated lately and wanted to lose about 10 kilograms. He stammered that I could not do that and asked if I was really serious about being on a diet. I shrugged and turned back to my computer screen, acting as if the conversation was normal. He stood there for a moment, staring at me with his mouth slightly open. The confident energy he usually carried had completely evaporated. He looked genuinely disturbed by what I had said. After several seconds of silence, he walked back to his desk without another word. For context, my current body mass index sits at 20.5, which falls comfortably within the healthy range. The imaginary target weight I mentioned would drop me down to 17.5, which is dangerously underweight. I have absolutely zero intention of losing any weight. If anything, I wish I could gain a few kilograms of muscle, but my metabolism makes that difficult. The rest of the day passed in silence. He avoided looking in my direction during the afternoon meeting. When he needed to communicate with me, he sent emails instead of walking over to my desk. The usual casual banter was gone, replaced by stiff professionalism. My co-workers noticed the shift in atmosphere but said nothing. Today has been even more awkward. He has not made eye contact with me once. The nickname has disappeared completely. When he addressed the team during our morning briefing, he used my actual name. Several colleagues shot me curious looks, clearly wondering what happened between yesterday and today. I am fully aware that I created this tension. Part of me feels slightly guilty for making the workplace uncomfortable, but a larger part of me feels satisfied. He needed to understand how his comments could affect people. If he can joke about my weight, then surely he can handle me joking back. The difference is that my joke made him genuinely worried, which proves my point. His jokes were never harmless. They were designed to make him feel superior and put me in my place. Now he has to sit with the discomfort of wondering if he pushed someone toward unhealthy behavior. The irony is not lost on me. If he brings up my weight again, I plan to have a direct conversation with him. I will explain exactly why his comments are inappropriate and how they could seriously harm someone with less confidence. But for now, I'm content to let him marinate in the awkward silence he helped create. I've been counting down the days until last night. My friends and I had been planning to check out this new club downtown, and I desperately needed a night out after dealing with back-to-back stressful weeks. When we were all figuring out how everyone would get there, one of my friends jumped in right away and said she'd drive us. She mentioned that she doesn't drink anyway, so staying sober and making sure we all got home safely wouldn't be a problem for her. I remember feeling really grateful and telling her how much I appreciated her doing that for us. The night kicked off exactly how I'd hoped it would. The music had everyone energized, the vibe was perfect, and for the first time in weeks I actually felt relaxed. I wasn't even drinking heavily, just enough to loosen up while I danced and caught up with everyone. Nothing seemed off until around 1 in the morning when my friend approached me looking completely drained. She explained that she was way too tired to stay any longer and needed to head out. I let her know that while I really appreciated her driving me there, I was still having a great time and would be totally fine just getting an Uber home whenever I was ready to leave. I made it clear there were no hard feelings whatsoever. But she immediately pushed back on that idea. She kept going on about how she felt responsible for getting me home since she'd been the one to drive me there in the first place. I kept reassuring her that I was a fully capable adult who could easily get myself home without any issues. She wouldn't hear it though. She insisted that leaving me at the club wouldn't be the right thing to do after she'd already brought me there. I tried once more to explain that I genuinely had no problem calling an Uber and that I'd actually planned on doing that anyway. But she just became more adamant about it. At this point, we'd been going back and forth long enough that people around us were starting to notice our discussion in the middle of the packed club. I really didn't want to cause a scene or mess up the night for anyone else who was still having fun. So I finally caved and agreed to leave with her. We tracked down the rest of our friends to say our goodbyes before heading out to the parking lot. I was pretty irritated about having to cut my night short, but I tried to look on the bright side that at least I'd be getting a free ride home and could just crash early. We got to her car and I climbed into the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt. That's when she hit me with something I definitely wasn't expecting. She casually mentioned that she was planning to go to her boyfriend's place instead of going straight home because it was closer and she was exhausted. I was immediately confused because I knew for a fact that her boyfriend lived in the complete opposite direction from where I lived. We were talking about a solid 20-minute drive the wrong way. I asked her to clarify what exactly she meant by that. She explained that her plan was to drive to his place and then I could just call an Uber from there to get myself the rest of the way home. I was stunned. She'd just spent a good 15 minutes at the club convincing me that she felt too responsible for my safety to leave me there where I was perfectly fine and comfortable. And now she was telling me her plan was to drop me off at some random spot near her boyfriend's house. But by this point we were already pulling out of the parking lot and starting to drive, so I didn't really have much choice in the matter. She made the full 20-minute drive to the neighborhood where her boyfriend lives. Then she pulled into a gas station parking lot and stopped the car. She told me this was where I should call my ride from and then wished me good night. I just sat there for a moment trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. I pulled my phone out and opened up the Uber app to request a ride. The app showed me that because of surge pricing at that time of night, getting back to my apartment was going to run me $25. If I'd just done what I originally wanted and stayed at the club before getting an Uber from there, I probably would have paid around $12 or $13 tops. Instead, I was now paying nearly double that amount because I've been pressured into leaving early and then driven in completely the wrong direction. I confirmed the Uber request and paid the fare before heading home, still trying to process the absurdity of the entire situation. When I woke up the next morning, I was still bothered by what had gone down. The money itself wasn't really the main issue, even though $25 is definitely not pocket change. What really got to me was the principle behind the whole thing. She'd made such a massive deal about feeling responsible for me and how she couldn't possibly leave me at the club by myself. She'd essentially forced me to leave when I had no desire to go anywhere. Then she'd driven me 20 minutes in the opposite direction of my home just so she could spend the night with her boyfriend and abandoned me at a gas station in a part of town I wasn't familiar with at 1:30 in the morning. That seemed like the opposite of taking responsibility for someone. I decided to send her a Venmo request for the $25. I kept it simple and didn't add any snarky comments or explanations in the payment description. Just the amount. My phone buzzed almost instantly with a text from her asking what the Venmo request was all about. I wrote back explaining that it was to cover the cost of the Uber I'd had to take from the gas station after she pulled me away from the club and then left me stranded there. Her response was immediate and angry. She went off about how ungrateful I was being considering she'd already given me a ride and that I should be thanking her instead of demanding money from her. I replied, pointing out that she'd been the one who insisted I leave with her and then she hadn't taken me home like she'd implied. She fired back saying I was blowing everything out of proportion and being petty over a measly $25. Somehow word of our argument spread to some of our other friends. They started inserting themselves into the situation and sharing their opinions. The majority of them took her side and said I was being ridiculous and that $25 wasn't something worth damaging a friendship over. Another friend chimed in saying I should just be happy that anyone was willing to be the designated driver in the first place. But they were all missing the entire point. I never once asked her to drive me anywhere or be responsible for getting me home. I was perfectly content to arrange my own transportation from the very start. She was the one who turned it into this weird situation by claiming she couldn't abandon me at the club because she felt responsible, only to abandon me somewhere completely different. If you're going to guilt trip someone into leaving somewhere because you supposedly feel responsible for their well-being, then you should probably follow through and ensure they get home safely. Not drive them 20 minutes in the wrong direction and leave them at a random gas station so you can go spend the night with your boyfriend. I still haven't received the $25, and at this point, about half of my friend group has decided I'm being petty and unreasonable. But I'm not backing down on this. I teach 4th grade. It's exhausting work, but watching kids learn and grow makes it worthwhile. Most parents understand that we're doing our best to keep their children safe and educated. Most parents, not all of them. Our spring fair was the big event of the year. We were raising money for new playground equipment since the old swings had been declared unsafe and removed. The goal was to raise at least $3,000. Every classroom had been preparing for weeks. My class was assigned to run the craft station where kids could make paper flowers. We had everything set up on long tables outside, construction paper in every color imaginable, glue sticks, pipe cleaners, and several pairs of scissors with rounded tips. The fair started at 1 p.m. and by 2 p.m. we had a steady stream of kids rotating through our station. Everything ran smoothly for the first hour. Kids made flowers, parents took photos, and everyone seemed happy. Then I noticed 2 boys from another class sitting at the far end of our table. One was quietly working on folding his paper. The other one was holding a pair of scissors in a way that made my stomach drop. He wasn't cutting anything. He was pointing the scissors at the other boy like a weapon. The other kid was trying to lean back, but he was trapped between the table and the bench. I started moving toward them immediately. The boy with the scissors kept jabbing them forward, getting closer each time. The other boy looked absolutely terrified. His eyes were wide and he was frozen in place. I got there just as the boy with the scissors raised his arm higher. He pulled back like he was going to thrust them forward, with real force. I grabbed his wrist and redirected his entire arm away. The scissors came within maybe 3 inches of the other boy's face. If I'd been 2 seconds slower, those scissors would have connected. Everything at the table went silent. The other kids had stopped working and were staring. Some looked scared, others looked shocked. I kept my grip on the boy's wrist and told him to drop the scissors right now. He tried to pull away from me, but I didn't let go. After a few seconds, he opened his hand and the scissors clattered onto the table. The other boy immediately scrambled off the bench and backed away. He was shaking. One of the parent volunteers, a mother who'd been helping at the station all afternoon, rushed over. She asked what happened. I told her to take the other boy to the nurse's office and stay with him. I said I needed to make sure he wasn't hurt and that someone should call his parents. She nodded and put her arm around the frightened child as they walked away. I kept the boy with the scissors right next to me. I called over to another teacher who was manning the ring toss booth nearby. I asked her to cover my station for a while. Then I walked the boy directly to the principal's office. My hands were actually shaking from adrenaline. I kept thinking about what could have happened. Those scissors could have punctured an eye, they could have sliced open his cheek, they could have caused permanent damage. The principal, who I'd worked with for 6 years, could tell something serious had happened from the look on my face. I explained everything while the boy sat in the chair next to me. He didn't say a word, didn't deny it, didn't apologize, just sat there looking annoyed. The principal called in the parent volunteer who'd witnessed the end of the incident. She confirmed what she'd seen. Then the principal called in the other boy and his parents, who'd rushed to the school. The boy was still shaking when he described what happened. He said the other boy had been threatening him for almost 5 minutes before I noticed. He said the boy told him he was going to hurt him, that he was going to make him sorry. The parents were horrified. 3 other students from my class who'd been sitting at the table were brought in one by one. They all told the same story. The boy with the scissors had been acting aggressive, had been threatening the other child, had raised the scissors to strike before I stopped him. The evidence was overwhelming. The principal called the boy's mother. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes. It took her closer to 30 minutes to arrive. We could hear her voice echoing through the hallways before we saw her. She was already angry before she knew what had happened. She burst into the principal's office demanding to know where her son was. She wanted to know what we'd done to him. The principal asked her to sit down, and she refused. The principal tried to explain that I had prevented her son from stabbing another student with scissors. She cut him off immediately. She said her son would never do something like that. She said he was a good boy who'd never hurt anyone. She insisted I must have grabbed him for no reason. She demanded that I be fired immediately. The principal told her we had multiple witnesses. She said she didn't care about witnesses. She said everyone was lying. I finally spoke up. I told her I stopped her son from seriously injuring another child. I said that was my job as a teacher. She turned on me. She said I had no right to put my hands on her child. She called it assault. She said she was calling the police. She was calling her lawyer. She said I'd be sorry for what I'd done. The principal tried to calm her down. He offered to show her the written statements from all the witnesses. She refused to look at them. She demanded to see security camera footage. The principal explained that the fair was outdoors and we didn't have cameras covering that area. She said that proved we were lying. She grabbed her son's hand and stormed out. Within 2 days, I received notice that she was suing me personally for assault and emotional distress. She was also suing the school district for negligence and allowing dangerous staff to work with children. She claimed I'd attacked her son without provocation. She said I'd caused him severe emotional trauma. The lawsuit demanded $75,000 in damages. I'd never been sued before. The anxiety was crushing. I couldn't sleep and I kept going over the incident in my mind. The school district assigned me a lawyer, which helped with the cost but not with the stress. My lawyer told me not to worry. She said the case was baseless and wouldn't hold up. But I still worried. The case dragged on for 4 months. During that time, more information surfaced about the boy. Other parents started coming forward. They said he'd been bullying their children for 2 years. One parent said he'd pushed her daughter down the stairs. Another said he'd threatened her son with a pencil. A third said he'd tried to choke another student during recess. The school had documentation of 12 separate incidents involving this child. Each time the administration had tried to work with his mother, each time she'd refused to acknowledge any problem. She always blamed other children, always blamed the teachers, always insisted her son was the victim. Nothing ever changed. Then Child Protective Services opened an investigation. Someone from the school had filed a mandatory report about the mother's behavior. Her reaction to learning her child had tried to stab another student wasn't concern. It wasn't an attempt to get him help. It was attacking everyone who'd stopped him. CPS wanted to understand what was happening at home. They wanted to know why this child thought violence was acceptable. They wanted to know why his mother defended these actions instead of correcting them. The lawsuit fell apart during depositions. The other boy's parents had filed assault charges against the child. They were also pursuing a civil case. My lawyer presented statements from 7 witnesses. All of them confirmed exactly what I'd said. The mother's lawyer looked uncomfortable. He clearly knew the case was going nowhere. During my deposition, the mother's lawyer asked me why I'd grabbed her son. I told him because her son was about to stab another child in the face with scissors. He asked if I was certain that was his intent. I said I was absolutely certain. He didn't ask many questions after that. 2 weeks later, the judge dismissed the entire case with prejudice. That meant she couldn't try to sue again. My lawyer said the judge had been visibly angry that such a frivolous case had wasted the court's time. But the consequences for the boy and his mother were just beginning. The school board scheduled a hearing about his continued enrollment. They reviewed his entire disciplinary record. They considered the current incident. They evaluated his mother's unwillingness to address his behavior or get him help. After 3 hours of testimony, they voted unanimously to expel him, not suspend. Permanent expulsion. The mother appealed the decision. She claimed it was excessive. She claimed her son was being discriminated against. The appeals board reviewed everything and upheld the expulsion. She'd have to find another school willing to accept him. Good luck with that. Any school she applied to would request his records. Those records would show a pattern of violence and a mother who enabled it. CPS continued their investigation for months. They required the mother to attend parenting classes. She had to meet with a social worker every 2 weeks. The boy was required to see a therapist specializing in childhood aggression. Last I heard, they were still under CPS monitoring. The other boy's parents came to see me about a month after everything was settled. They brought him with them. He seemed much happier, much more relaxed. They thanked me for protecting their son. They said they didn't want to imagine what would have happened if I hadn't been paying attention. I told them I was just glad he was safe. The mother started crying. She said the doctor told them that if those scissors had hit his eye, he likely would have lost vision in it permanently. The thought still makes me sick. I still teach 4th grade at the same school. I still help run the spring fair every year. We did eventually raise enough money for the new playground equipment. It took 2 years, but we got there. But I changed how I run the craft station. The scissors stay locked in a box now. Kids have to ask for them specifically. They can only use them while I'm watching. When they're done cutting, the scissors go right back in the box. Some of the other teachers thought I was being overly cautious. Then I told them the full story. Now several of them have adopted the same policy. I watch the kids more carefully now too. Not just at the fair, but every day. I've been working retail for about 2 years now, and honestly, most days blur together in a haze of beeping scanners and customers who can't remember their PIN codes. But what happened yesterday might get me fired. And the whole thing started when I tried to be helpful. The other day, I was supposed to clock out at 5. My co-worker who was scheduled for the evening shift got stuck in traffic. Like, actually stuck. Not the fake traffic excuse people use when they oversleep. He sent a picture of the highway looking like a parking lot. My manager wasn't on a floor and I knew if I left, there would be nobody at the registers. Customers would just be standing there staring at empty lanes. So I stayed. 15 minutes. I figured it was the right thing to do. The next morning, my manager pulled me into his office. He sat me down like I'd committed some major offense and started talking about payroll integrity. He kept using words like unauthorized and structure. He told me I was not allowed to work outside my scheduled hours under any circumstances. He made it sound like I'd broken into the store after hours to rack up overtime. I tried to explain that I was just covering until my coworker arrived, but he cut me off. He told me it didn't matter. The schedule exists for a reason. Rules are rules. He even pulled up the employee handbook on his computer and showed me the section about unauthorized hours. He said if it happened again, there would be a formal write-up. I said fine, I understood. From now on, I would stick to my schedule exactly. He nodded like he'd won some kind of victory and told me I could go. Yesterday I was scheduled 9 to 5. Everything was normal until around 4 in the afternoon when the evening cashier called out. Her kid got sick at school. She had to leave work early to pick him up. I heard my manager take the call in the back office. He was doing inventory, which apparently requires his full attention because he stayed back there for another 40 minutes. By 4:15, the line at my register was starting to build. By 4:30, it was getting worse. A guy buying beer, a woman with 3 gallons of ice cream, another woman arguing with me about a coupon that expired 2 years ago. She insisted she uses it all the time and we always take it. I kept scanning items fast, but the line wasn't shrinking. People kept joining the line faster than I could ring them up. By 4:45, there were at least 10 people waiting. Some of them were checking their watches. One guy sighed really loud and put his basket on the floor. At 4:56, my manager finally came out from the back. He walked up to my register and leaned in close so the customers couldn't hear. He asked if I could stay a little late, just until he found coverage. He said it like it was no big deal, like last week never happened. I felt my entire brain stop, because last week staying late was apparently a fireable offense. He'd spent 20 minutes lecturing me about how I was not authorized to work outside my shift. He'd pulled up the handbook and everything, so I looked at him and told him I wasn't allowed to do that. I reminded him that I needed to respect the schedule, that working outside my hours violated payroll integrity. His smile got really tight. He stared at me for a second, then walked away without saying anything. At exactly 5 o'clock, I finished ringing up the customer in front of me. She had a cart full of groceries that came out to $73.42. I flipped the lane closed sign and started counting my drawer. There were still 7 or 8 people in line behind her. They were staring at me like I'd just told them the store was on fire. One guy asked if I was serious. I told him sorry. Store policy. Another woman asked when the next cashier would be available. I told her I didn't know. I kept counting. My manager was still in the back somewhere. I could hear people grumbling behind me as I bundled the cash and filled out the deposit slip. I clocked out at 5:02 because counting a drawer takes time. On my way to the back, I could hear my manager behind the register trying to figure out how to use the system. He was asking the bagger how to override a coupon. The bagger was trying to explain it, but my manager kept pressing the wrong buttons. I almost laughed. I dropped my drawer in the safe and grabbed my stuff from my locker. When I walked past the front on my way out, I could see my manager still struggling with the register. The line had gotten even longer. Apparently, after I left, 3 customers just abandoned their carts and walked out. One of them had over $200 worth of groceries. The coupon woman demanded to speak to a manager, which must have been amazing because he was the manager. He had to stand there and argue with her himself about a coupon that expired during a different presidential administration. The bagger told me later that it took almost 20 minutes. This morning he called me into the office again. He told me I embarrassed him, that I heard the store's numbers, that I should have used common sense. He kept saying I knew what he meant. I asked him what part of his very clear instructions from last week I was supposed to ignore. He didn't have an answer for that. He just kept saying I was being difficult, that I was making his job harder, that I put him in an impossible position. I reminded him that he put himself in that position by doing inventory instead of finding coverage when the evening cashier called out at 4. He didn't like that. His face got red and he told me not to talk back. He said he was considering writing me up for following his rules, the exact rules he screamed at me about a week ago. I asked him what the write-up would say. He didn't answer. He just waved his hand and told me to get back to work. Then he handed me next week's schedule on my way out. Suddenly, voluntary overtime is approved. There's a note at the bottom saying all cashiers are encouraged to stay late if needed. Funny how structure becomes flexible when it's his problem. The bagger has been grinning at me every time my manager walks by. He clearly thinks this is hilarious. He keeps making comments about how smooth the register closing went yesterday. My manager pretends not to hear him. Honestly, it might be the only thing keeping me sane right now. I didn't yell. I didn't break any rules. I did exactly what I was told to do, and somehow I'm the villain. My manager is walking around acting like I personally torpedoed the store's quarterly earnings because I clocked out on time. He's been avoiding eye contact with me all day. Every time I see him, he finds something urgent to do in the opposite direction. I'm waiting to see if the write-up actually happens. Part of me hopes it does because I'd love to see him try to explain this to corporate. He'd have to admit that he told me not to work outside my schedule and then got mad when I didn't work outside my schedule. But another part of me knows that in retail, logic doesn't always win. I've been going to the same gym for some years now. The instructors push you hard enough that you feel like you've done something worthwhile, but they're not so intense that you dread showing up. It's become part of my routine, something I actually look forward to most mornings. This morning I arrived early like I always do. I like getting a good bike in the spin studio, somewhere in the middle where I can see the instructor, but I'm not front and center the whole time. I settled onto my usual bike, adjusted the seat height, clipped my shoes into the pedals, and started my warm-up. The studio was filling up slowly, people coming in with their water bottles and gym bags. Everyone getting ready in their own way. That's when she walked in. I don't usually judge people on sight, but this woman had something about her that immediately set me on edge. Her nose was pointed so high in the air I'm surprised she could see where she was going. Her lips were so full of filler that she looked like she'd been stung by a bee. She had that look about her, the kind that says the world exists to serve her and everyone else is just in the way. She walked past my bike without even looking at me, reached out and grabbed the sweat towel that was sitting on my handlebars. Just took it, like it was hers, like I wasn't even there. I sat there for a second, pedaling slowly, trying to process what had just happened. Did she really just take my towel? I looked around the studio, scanning for the usual pile of extra towels near the door or by the instructor's bike. Nothing. The gym must have been running low on clean ones that morning. Meanwhile, this woman walked over to a bike near the front and placed 2 towels on her handlebars. 2? She had taken mine so she could have a backup. Now I know it's not the end of the world. A sweat towel is not a life or death situation, but the sheer nerve of it got under my skin. Who does that? Who looks at another person's belongings and decides they have more of a right to them? It's the principle of the thing. The entitlement. The complete disregard for anyone else in the room. My first instinct was to get off my bike and walk over there to take it back. Just go up to her, grab the towel, and return to my spot without saying a word. But then a better idea came to me. Why should I be the one to disrupt my warm-up and make a scene? There was a simpler solution. The instructor was making her rounds, checking on everyone to make sure they were ready for class. She's great, really personable, and always willing to help. I caught her eye and waved her over. She leaned in close so I could talk without shouting over the music that was already playing softly in the background. I explained what had happened, pointing quietly at the woman with 2 towels. The instructor's face went from neutral to annoyed in about half a second. She shook her head and walked back to the front of the room where her bike was set up. She flipped on her microphone and her voice filled the studio. She told everyone that they would definitely need a sweat towel in today's class. The comment seemed random to everyone else, but I knew what was coming. She walked right over to the towel thief and without hesitation picked up one of the towels from her handlebars. Her voice came through the speakers again, loud and clear for everyone to hear. She said that people needed to respect others in the class and not take their things. The entire studio went silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the woman. Some people had confused expressions, trying to figure out what had happened. Others seemed to understand right away and shook their heads in disapproval. The instructor walked back across the room and handed me the towel with a small smile. The towel thief was furious. Her face turned red, and she started shouting something back at the instructor in Russian. I don't speak the language, but the tone was clear. She was livid. The instructor just ignored her, turned her music up, and started the class like nothing had happened. For the rest of the hour, I could feel the woman's eyes on the back of my head. She was clearly seething, probably more embarrassed than anything else. Being called out in front of a room full of strangers will do that to a person. But I didn't care. She had it coming, and the instructor was right. That class was brutal. I needed that towel. By the end of it, I was dripping with sweat, my legs were burning, and I felt like I'd run a marathon. The towel was essential. I can't imagine what it would have been like without one, especially knowing the person who took it had to for no good reason. When class ended, the woman bolted out of the studio without looking at anyone. I hung back for a bit, wiping down my bike and chatting with the instructor. She apologized for the drama but said she couldn't stand people like that. I thanked her for handling it perfectly. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.